Thank you for all coming to the grand unveiling of a new display. I get very excited when twice a year this big velvet curtain appears in this corridor, and it means that there's a new display. Abigail and Gloria have been working with Matthew in the Tayside Medical History Museum for the last 4 weeks and are going to unveil their display and then talk us through a little bit of the thinking behind it and how they went about curating it. So, are you ready? Will I just leave it over to you?
Yes.
There you go.
Who's doing the drum roll?
Yeah. Who's gonna?
Okay. Should we get everyone to do a drum roll then?
Yes.
Alright. Woo!
So hi, my name is Gloria, and that's Abigail. So today we're just going to be talking about our display, which is based on the history of medical hygiene, and just looking at how it's evolved over the years, and just looking at how practices have changed as well. So just looking at the display, we just had this idea of splitting it into 2 different sections. At the top, it's just looking more at hygiene tools, in terms of PPE and reusable items. So we have stuff like gloves and the masks and the goggles, which we all kind of know and we use daily. And we also have the sanitary bottles. We have antiseptics and hydrogen peroxide, which is still used nowadays. And we have a bunch of bandages, and we also have a Sestra mask there, which is an older type of mask that was used back in the day, more in the war times. And then we have the first aid kit, which is made of wood compared to what we have now, which is more plastics and stuff. So you can see a bit of contrast there. And we also have a couple items here that were from the needle exchange, which came from a pharmacy, which we'll talk about more later during the presentation. And just looking lower here, we have more surgical items. So we have the surgical kit there that was used by a surgeon, and it's just more of an older design. And then we have older gloves. They do look like they've been used, but I promise you they have not. And we have just a couple tools here, which were made out of ivory. So that just shows you how we've moved on from having more organic material in our instruments and more looking at metal pieces and stuff like that. And yeah, we have the autoclaves here. We have 2 different kinds, and this is a bigger one, a bit of a smaller one, but they all kind of have the idea of sanitizing the items before we could use them again. But now we have a more advanced way of doing that by having the big autoclaves compared to these smaller ones. So yeah, that's just a brief overview of the display.
Yeah, and so to go along with our display, we also have a poster over here, which I'm not sure everyone can see, but I promise it's there. We've chosen to focus on specific moments in history that were pivotal to the progression of hygiene for medicine. So our first one is more traditional hygiene, things like honey and garlic that was used millennia ago, way back, to treat against infections and your wounds, and to go against if you had salmonella and stuff. Then we moved down to the 19th century when things like hand washing wasn't too big. So there was Ignaz Semmelweis who brought in the idea, but nobody liked it. Because when doctors were treating mothers who were giving birth, those mothers were dying. And he was like, why is this happening? And he found out that doctors were going from the cadaver labs straight to the midwife areas and delivering the babies. So all of the germs that were on their hands were going straight to the mums and killing them. And he said, hey guys, you're the reason these mums are dying. If you wash your hands with chlorine, it'll stop happening. And they didn't like they were being accused of killing people. So that didn't really come into play until Florence Nightingale, when she said the same things. And everybody trusted Florence Nightingale. So Next we go on to the wars, which were really pivotal for hygiene because war breeds innovation. So we've talked about things needing to be portable, needing to figure out how to deal with overcrowding and getting diseases through that. So things like influenza and typhus were rife in the trenches. Things like penicillin, although they came about before the war, as a result of the war, there was such a need for it that it got manufactured at a much greater rate, and that's sort of how it came into play in World War II. And after that we talk about the rise of like single-use materials after the wars, so things like your plastic instruments, your syringes. We talked a little bit about IV tubes and catheters, and although it has a more effect on the carbon footprint, it's much better in terms of hygiene risks being lowered. And lastly, we talk about the modern day. So we've talked about the decontamination unit. We've got one in Tayside that decontaminates materials for a bunch of different hospitals in Scotland, not just in Dundee. We've talked a little bit about COVID, because obviously that's quite relevant, and how there were patient safety practices put into play there, and the current need for infection controls. We do also have some photos on the poster as well. Most of these have been taken directly from Tayside. So we've got 2 from the Dundee Royal Infirmary from the 19th century in the war, and we've got one from the modern day Ninewells surgical units. And one of them does contrast to the photo we've got in here. So for our 19th century, you can see that all the doctors in the photo are barehanded, without masks, without PPE, doing their surgeries right in the body. As opposed to this one, which was taken a little bit later in 1909, where everyone's suited and booted, they're all PPE'd up, ready to get their photos taken. So yeah, any questions?
I always like to ask, what's your favourite item in the display? And why?
Well, I think my favourite might be the needle exchange, because I went to a lot of effort to get it. So I went about different Rowan's pharmacies to see if I could get a hold of 2 packets, being like, hey, I'm not an IV drug user, but can I have one for my display? And it just shows the emphasis on infection control outside of clinics, just in your day-to-day, because it was such a big issue of drug users sharing needles and like transferring like HIV and other bloodborne viruses. So if you have a dirt needle, you can bring it in and get a clean pack, so you don't need to do that. And I just think that's such a good incentive for people, and it really increases safety, so that's probably my favourite.
I would have to say, I think the autoclave, the bigger one actually, although it was a big struggle to figure out where to place it. I do think, because I looked more into the decontamination unit here in Ninewells, and I just thought that was really interesting, looking at the differences between how we've moved on to more complex ways of sterilising equipment. So yeah.
Just the very last thing I forgot to mention, we do also have a QR code at the bottom. If anybody would like to give us feedback, you're more than welcome to. Just so people can tell us what they think about our display. But yeah, we hope you liked it.
Any other questions? Anybody else have any questions or comments?
Yeah.
Why did you choose hygiene?
Yeah, we had a few different ideas. Sort of like we done explored inequalities, we explored specifically wartime medicine. But when we had a look into the stores and saw everything that was there was a lot of items that just jumped out at us that focused more on hygiene. So like the autoclaves and the sort of, specifically the pine oil bottle that I really liked. And we thought it would be the easiest to convey to a sort of general audience, rather than being too specific and maybe losing some people. So it just seemed like the most, it just seemed like the best option.
Tell us what you found the most challenging part of doing the project.
I would say, to begin with, just narrowing down what we really wanted to use as our topic, I think was our biggest challenge at first. But yeah, we did use a different variety of techniques just to figure out what we would prefer to look into. And also, I would say we did really good with just managing the project, the amount of work we were doing. And just good communication, I thought, was part of why this went so well. In terms of the display itself, I would say, so we got the poster done quite easily, I would say, and just figuring out the color scheme and stuff, and just looking at how we wanted to place everything in a more systematic way. So just separating it based on a theme of surgical stuff and then PPE kind of. So I just felt because we had to move around a lot of things just to figure, like, make sure it did look more presentable. So yeah, I think that was probably the biggest challenge towards the end for us.
I think we also did have a little bit of an issue with the amount of stuff we wanted to put in. So we had so much. We went to Cahill, we went to the stores, Moreland's Pharmacy. So we had this big pile of stuff, a bunch of gowns, we had scrubs, we had a lot of stuff. So we had to go through each individual item and be like, okay, what paints the best picture here, what flows the best, what sort of, just because we like it. So narrowing that down was a little difficult because there was, again, some things that were like, this is really cool, but not so relevant. But I think in the end we got a pretty good display of it, so I'm happy.
Matthew, thank you so much.
My pleasure. No, it's been an absolute joy to work with you both, and I totally agree. You've done a fantastic display, and I love your super Canva organising skills with the panel as well. It looks really good.
Brilliant. Another round of applause in order.